It's another edition of the Locked On Bengals mailbag. Expectations for the Cincinnati Bengals in 2022. Zack Taylor's conservative play calling? Question mark. And some under the radar contributors that could emerge in this season.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team, the Cincinnati Bengals, every day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. We appreciate you making us your first listen, and for all of you that subscribe and follow, we really appreciate your patronage, loyalty, and listenership to the Locked On Bengals podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Bengals listeners will get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. And that includes engagement. Use promo code Locked On at checkout at BlueNile.com. James, today we're going to dive into another episode of the Offseason mailbag. We got some folks wondering about reasonable expectations this year, and that's where we're going to start. As always, we sprinkle in some fun to the mailbag. When we get fun questions, we like to drop those in. We've got a good one today from Chase, spelt with a C, because of last C. Yeah, okay. I was like, isn't Chase? And then I figured it out. We're going to talk a little bit about Zack Taylor play calling and some questions about various down roster contributors that we'll discuss as well. But we're going to start with Sean McGibbon's question, James, at Sean_Mac_296 on Twitter. He writes, what is a reasonable expectation for this team this year? Going to the Super Bowl was ahead of schedule, writes Sean. So would anything short of an AFC championship appearance be a step back, or is making the playoffs enough to say the Bengals are still on schedule? What say you?
Making the playoffs is no longer a reasonable expectation for this Bengals team, right? That's reasonable in 2013 for Andy Dalton and AJ Green and that team. This is different because Joe Burrow is different. Jamar Chase is different. T. Higgins, Joe Mixon. We could talk about the defense. Everyone that's listening probably has a good handle on the roster, so I don't need to go up and down the depth chart. The point is the window is wide open now. So when you're talking about expectation, I think playoffs are bare minimum. And if you just make the playoffs, well, no. I think the expectations win the division in what I consider the second best division behind the AFC West in all of the NFL, win the division and be considered a Super Bowl contender, legitimate Super Bowl contender, not a, oh, well, if everything goes right, they might have a shot in Nashville in the divisional round. Or, man, they beat Kansas City week 17. You never know, but it is in Kansas City. It's going to be tough in the AFC title game. No. When they, if they win the division, which is my expectation, and they have to go to Buffalo, you think that, not that they have a puncher's chance, a reasonable chance to go there and win, much like you would say if Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Andy Reid and those boys had to go up there in recent years and play Buffalo. You'd feel the same way, right? And so that's where my expectation is for the Bengals to take what they did last year, continue that success, and put themselves in that realm or cement themselves, not put themselves, because they did that last year, cement themselves in that realm of Super Bowl contenders in the AFC. And so does that mean winning the AFC? I think that's really hard to say. Right? Like, oh, I expect you to win the AFC. Well, it's really damn hard and things have to go your way. So I don't know if I would say that. But when the playoffs start, we can't have the Bengals listed as a dark horse. They need to be in the playoffs, hopefully have won the division from an expectation standpoint. And then you got to feel, like they can go anywhere and win. Or who knows, maybe they're the number one seed and they're hosting all of the playoff games throughout the AFC.
Yeah, I think either way, the common theme there is you're expecting that they are going to the playoffs and winning a playoff game. And that is a reasonable expectation. You might have better, bigger expectations. You might expect them to go to the AFC Championship game. You might expect them to go to the Super Bowl. But like you said, James, those things are really hard. When you get to the playoffs, a one and done elimination, you never know when things are just going to go off the rails. And we've seen that. I would think that Chiefs fans would argue that their season went off the rails in the second half against the Bengals. Bills fans would argue that their season went off the rails in the last 30 seconds, 8 seconds, whatever it was against the Chiefs. Right. And so when you get to the playoffs, things get a little crazy, but I think go to the playoffs, be a Super Bowl contender, expect to win a playoff game is reasonable expectations. As I sit here today, if the Bengals exit the playoffs in the first round of 2022, I would be disappointed with where my expectations are for this team. It
What
could
if they
happen because the playoffs are weird and they get crazy and injuries happen and all this stuff. But here
sure?
we are in early June. That's kind of where I'm at for my reasonable expectations for this year.
What if they get the 1 seed and much like the Titans lose in the divisional round? Because to me, that would be just as disappointing. Like not winning a playoff game. I like how you put it, because to me, that's just as disappointing as losing in the wild card, right? Because if you win the division, you get the 1 seed. I don't give a damn who's coming out, right? Or what the issue is. You're hosting them at Paul Brown Stadium and you feel like you're the best team in the conference. So that would be a disappointing loss as well and a disappointing season overall, I would say.
I agree with that because you think about what the Bengals would have to do to get the 1 seed. They
Yep.
play the Chiefs and the Bills and the Buccaneers and the NFC. I know, but like they play the teams that are in contention for the 1 seed in the AFC. They don't play the Chargers, who I think a lot of people would argue are in contention for the 1 seed. A lot of people think the Browns, if Deshaun Watson plays the whole year, are going to be a contender. They play the Browns twice. So if the Bengals come out of this schedule with the 1 seed in the AFC, they lose that game. That's probably pretty disappointing. It's not like they're the Titans with an AFC South schedule to run through, right? The AFC North is still going to be a really strong competitive division that's going to see teams stealing games from one another. And so, yeah, I think losing a playoff game would be disappointing regardless of where they're seated.
Yep. No, I think we're in lockstep with this one. But I just want to take a second. And at some point, we'll get to a point, assuming they have the success we're expecting, where we don't just say, let's take a second and think about where they're at right now and how fun it is to talk about that. Because I don't think the Chiefs are talking about that, right? I don't think the Rams necessarily are talking about that. But for the Bengals, where they were a year ago to where they are now and the way expectations are, it's awesome. It's pretty fun, at least for
Yeah,
our business and certainly for fans.
what were we even saying at this time last year? Like, get close to the playoffs, have a winning record, expect them to be somewhere around 500 is kind of what
Is
I thought reasonable expectations were.
Yeah, will Burrow be fully cleared to go for camp
Right.
was
Yeah.
was a big topic at this stage, even though
Mhm.
he was on the field for OTAs. Mixon, does he look the same? Will he be the same coming off of that injury? Riley Reef was a conversation. Jackson Carman was still a conversation then, as you remember. Trey Hopkins, would he come back
Yeah.
from the ACL and be fully cleared? So there was a lot of ifs, whats, buts, all of those things. Trey Hendrickson, was he going to be able to deliver on
Mhm.
the bag that he got? I
Mhm.
mean, now we're
There were a
not
lot
really
of
having many
questions.
of those. Yeah, we're not having many of those debates, huh?
Yeah. No, now we're just arguing about what kind of car I drive or which Bengal we are. If you were to line this up with a personality or football fit, we're going to go there next with Chase's question. It's a fun one. And you're going to find out. Well, he wanted to know if either of us, in our dynamic duo, which of us was Joe Burrow and which of us was Jamar Chase. And I think we agree that neither of us are either of those guys. But we'll dive into who we think the other host aligns with and get into that conservative play call question coming up next.
If you like the Bengals, if you like this podcast, you probably like jewelry. And it might not be for you. Maybe it's for your wife or girlfriend or your mother or someone else that you're related to or close with. And well, BlueNile.com is the spot to go for all of your fine jewelry needs, whether it's an engagement, whether it's a birthday coming up, whether it's just to show that special someone that you want to get them something awesome. You can do that at BlueNile.com. And whether it's wedding jewelry like engagement rings or a wedding band, which is something that guys, let's be honest, you don't really think about that part of it when you propose. Oh, well, now you got to get a wedding band. So BlueNile.com is got you covered there. And it's really, really simple. They make it awesome. It's a great experience. So check them out right now at BlueNile.com. And Locked On Bengals listeners are going to get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more. It's a podcast exclusive, and it includes engagement. So if you're about to get engaged, go to BlueNile.com, use promo code Locked On, and you're going to get $50 off any purchase of $500 or more. It's going to come in a discreet package. It's not going to give away what's inside, so don't delay. Get to BlueNile.com today and use promo code Locked On.
James, I really thought Chase had a fun question for us today. And we play up our disagreements. We have fun with it. Just to put to rest, James and I get along just fine. But I'm going to read this question because he thinks we're feuding.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you play into it.
We
Perfect.
get along.
That's the character. You're doing really well. Good
No
acting.
character. I hate you.
No, I know. It's great. Really good stuff. Chase, spelt with a C because the second C in Chase's name is a C, at Chase_W on Twitter, wrote, there seems to be a little feud going on in the podcast as of late. Let's stir the pot a little more for fun. Between the dynamic duo of Jake and James, who is the Joe Burrow and who is the Jamar Chase? And when we were looking at this question, we sat there and said, I was like, I don't think you're Jamar. I don't think you're Joe either. And I don't think I'm either of those guys. And I came up with somebody else, but you have a surprise for me. So who am I, James, on the Cincinnati Bengals roster?
I mean, this just ties together with what we talked about earlier in the week, my man. You're Drew Sample.
Oh
You're Drew. You're Drew Sample.
In what way?
What's wrong with that?
Drew Sample isn't elite. I am elite at podcasting, James. At least give me Hayden Hurst, the guy that some people out there are saying is going to double CJ Uzama's production. Come on.
Double? Oh, well, that's
I think that's lofty. A lot.
But no, I had to tell the Drew Sample. By the way, I like Drew. Please do not tell him or act like I don't like him, because it's a fun thing here that we're doing suddenly on Locked On Bengals since Jake is so pro Drew Sample. No, I thought Jesse Bates. I kind of, because he's quiet. Like this dude, I remember the first time I interviewed Jesse Bates, he's a rookie, and he was in like the rookie area of the locker room, in not the main area that he is now. And just really quiet kid, right? That had a personality, you could tell, but you could tell he was all business and all of those things. And he handles his business. And this has nothing to do with the contract stuff. I don't think you're in dispute with Locked On right now. Maybe you are. But I don't think that, extension issues are a thing. So not from that aspect, but I just think, confident, not cocky, quiet fits the bill. And is he elite or not? Well, he's really damn good. So the elite award gets tossed around a lot, but
you just had to throw it in at the end, huh? Yeah. I'll take Jesse Bates, fireman, covers up for the mistakes of the rest of his defense. I'm not saying you're the rest of the defense, because I think you're an offensive player. So I'm not covering up for your mistakes. To be clear about that. But the feud is fun. Yeah. So for James, I don't know if I'm quiet, by the way, but Workman, like a little bit more like straight man between the two of us, probably.
I think you're quiet when you're not being, not talking for a living, right? So on the podcast, you can't be quiet.
Sure.
But it's not during the Super Bowl. You think you were loud? Like during that week? I don't think you were loud.
I'm not loud. I'd say I'm average. Anyway, let's talk about who I have for James.
Splitting hairs.
James.
Drew Sample.
Drew Sample splits hairs now? Man, we're going to have to get Drew Sample something nice. We're going to have to go get him.
I like Drew. I like you.
Some Built Bars. Go get him a box of Built Bars, James.
That's my actual comp. Go ahead.
God. James, as many of you know, is very confident, and also always thinks he's a wide receiver, or thinks he would play wide receiver, or if he played football, maybe we'll play wide receiver.
I would.
Thinks he's really fast, and the speed isn't exactly the comp here. But Tyler Boyd has a certain amount of swagger about him, James, a certain amount of confidence, productive, really good player. And I think he might be like the flashiest of the Bengals receivers in terms of personality, in terms of, because T is just this wholesome guy. I think T's humble. and is just enjoying playing football and like loving his life. And Jamar, very confident for sure, but it's just a little bit different. I think Tyler's a little bit louder about it. You know what I mean? And I think that
I,
that's you as well.
I, I think so. I don't know because I think Jamar's pretty flashy. I just don't think he's
It's a different
super
kind of flashy
boisterous.
though, you
Yeah, yeah,
know?
yeah. But
Yeah.
like, there's a reason Joe Burrow got grills the week of the Super Bowl. It's because Jamar's like, boy, I'm getting you grills and I'm getting some
Yeah.
for me too, right? So,
Yeah.
that being said, no, I get it. I get what you're saying. There early in Tyler Boyd's career, he was like benched and active in his second season with Marvin earlier in that year, and by the end of it, he caught that game-winning touchdown against Baltimore at the end of the 2017 season, Dalton to Boyd, and it kind of transformed his career. And then year three, boom, goes off, and there you go. That's Tyler Boyd. And no, I think that belief aspect of it, I could totally see that because there's certainly been plenty of times in my career where people, would have had me on the inactive list. So I'm not against that at all. Boyd's my guy. I'll take that one.
I thought it was a good fit. Also, I just because I know that your relationship with him as far as current Bengals goes back pretty far in the
2016 when
early.
he was drafted. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know what's crazy? It's been so busy, and he was so busy the other day since we've gotten back to open locker room. So it's 3 weeks now. I still haven't even said hi. I haven't even been able to talk to him. So because he's either been busy or I've been like introducing myself to people and talking, and it's just one of those things. Talked to Joe Burrow twice. Haven't talked to Tyler Boyd. So I'm gonna have to change
gotta
that next week.
gotta show the veterans some love. Let's get to our next question here. We've talked about Zack Taylor's play calling. We spent a segment or more on this. I want to say a couple weeks ago. Rab at Books and Bengals writes that Zack Taylor was conservative down the stretch with play calls. Do you think a personnel upgrade up front will help him take a step forward or become even ruthless in that area, or is that just not his MO?
No, I think it is. I think we're going to see more of an unleashed playbook. There's going to be pages that were probably not ripped out last year, but they were folded over, or they had post-it notes of "Don't call this," labeled "Don't call this" on them because it just didn't work. And you would expect that the Bengals offense would be much more functional. And the one time, well, really two times where I think Zach showed one that he's a player's coach, but two that he's willing to what have that mm, that how did he describe it? Ruthless, right? That's how Rab. I was looking at the
Oh,
question.
okay.
He,
Yeah.
he
Sorry.
described it as ruthless. The Ravens game where Burrow throws for
Hmm.
525 and he's staying aggressive, and then afterwards he's like, "I'm not going to be ashamed of that," and I told our guys not to be ashamed of that win either. That's the part that's like, oh, maybe that happens. And then it was subtle, but putting Jamar in that Week 18 game just to get him the Bengals record, that's part of the player side.
Yeah.
But I think that it takes a little bit to do that. So I do think he has a ruthless side that we might be able to see this year. So I wouldn't rule it out, and that's the fun part, is I think we're going to see a different Zack Taylor to a degree as a play caller this season.
And I think he did learn something from the 49ers game when he went to Joe Burrow and put the game on his shoulders a little bit too late. And he kind of got away from that in the playoffs at times, which is a little concerning, but also in the playoffs, their offensive line got even less functional. So I get why that happens. But with that improved offensive line, you go back to Joe Burrow's rookie year when it was empty all day, every day. Joe Burrow, you're going to win us this game or lose us this game. And then they protect Joe Burrow and the offensive line a little bit early in the season. Then they get comfortable and they start to open things up a little bit. Then Riley Reef gets hurt and the offensive line starts to deteriorate a little bit. And then the pass rushes get a little bit better and the defenses step up in the playoffs and you see them kind of revert again. I think you can make a case that it's personnel related, quality of opponent related, matchup related, but it is a big question for me. And I am going to be watching intently to see how this changes in 2022. Like Samaje Perine on 4th and 1 in the Super Bowl. Preventable, right?
Mhm.
Potentially could change the game. And so that's why we ask the questions. That's why this is something we're going to watch. But there's also some evidence that suggests, to your point, James, that ruthlessness is there and could be unleashed a little bit more in 22. But for me, it's something that I'll be watching closely. We're going to finish up the show coming up next with some discussion about some under the radar contributors, such as who's going to be the third, fourth, and fifth leading receivers for the team, what player has the most to prove, and who's going to be the sneaky contributor. We'll wrap up the mailbag with those questions coming up next.
BetOnline is a one-stop shop for all of your sports betting needs. And whether it's the NBA Finals, which have already started or are about to start, if you watched in the 1 hour before the finals start, as this is posted, you can wager on Steph and crew, who I wagered on with BetOnline before the playoffs started to win the Western Conference, and I got paid, baby. You can too by going to BetOnline. And maybe it has to do with ruthlessness, because Joe Burrow, ruthless, and he could put up huge numbers this year. Maybe you think he's going to win MVP. You can wager on that and so much more, from Major League Baseball to UFC to boxing to auto car racing, in one spot. And it's BetOnline. So don't delay. Sign up for free and start wagering and getting paid today. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Before we dive into the third segment of the mailbag, we have an important favor to ask our listeners. We've put together a survey so we can learn more about our listeners, like you, and make sure that Locked On Bengals is an even better podcast. This is an opportunity to tell us what you like and don't like about our podcast. You can go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It won't take you very long, and everyone that completes the survey will qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. So go take our audience survey. Again, lockedonpodcast.com/survey. And we appreciate your assistance in this feedback gathering effort. James, back into the mailbag we go. We've got a few questions to get to here and not a ton of time to get through them. So a throwback to the old days of the Locked On Bengals mailbag when we moved a little bit more quickly. The first question from Zoltz, Zoults on Twitter. Out of all the offseason acquisition, free agents, rookies, undrafted rookies, who's going to be the sneaky contributor, using last year's comparison of Eli Apple as the guy that was a sneaky contributor from last year's crop?
Wow. I mean, that's tough. Here's why it's tough. Because they haven't signed an Eli Apple, right? Like, they signed 4 guys, and all 4 are like, Hayden Hurst is the lowest end of it, and he's a starter. It's 4 starters on offense, unless I'm forgetting someone. They drafted Cam Taylor-Britt as a second rounder, really sneaky. What if I go third round, right? Could Cordell Volson, I guess you could say Cordell Volson, but we've talked a lot about him for a fourth round pick. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying is so it's like, where is the sneakiness? And so to me, it's not there. Maybe Zach Carter, if you want to say that with the third round. I think the answer is this guy is not on the team yet, and that they're going to add someone that could be under the radar that ends up contributing. But if I had to give it an answer now, I'd go with a rookie. Dax Hill certainly isn't it. I guess Zach Carter, because he's going to play as of now. He's just going to have to, of these offseason acquisitions. Am I missing someone? Is there someone obvious that it's just slipping my mind?
No, I mean, if we're not counting the players that were retained, which would be Eli Apple, Josh Tupou, Stanley Morgan, Trey Flowers,
easier if you add those. Yeah.
Yeah, because maybe you can make an argument for Josh Tupou. Maybe you can make an argument for Trey Flowers reprising his role and continuing to do a good job against tight ends. But yeah, for the guys they brought in from that weren't on the team last year, that's Alex Kappa. Can't be sneaky when you're signed to be a starting guard. Lyle Collins can't be sneaky when you're signed to be a starting right tackle. Ted Karras can't be sneaky when you get the idea. Same for Hayden Hurst, who would probably be the best case, like the best argument out of all the free agents they signed, even though he was signed to be a starting tight end, just because he's getting paid the least out of any of these guys. He's getting paid $3.5 million. That's not exactly starting tight end money, to be honest. That's backup tight end money, veteran backup tight end money, and he's going to start and could be a really high level contributor. But yeah, when you look at the guys they've brought in from other teams, Nick Eubanks, is he going to be tight end 3? Is he going to be a sneaky, it's hard to make an argument there. And you went through the draft picks as well. Zachary Carter certainly could be the one. Jeff Gunter, if he makes a team and is a rotational pass rusher, he could be the one, but it's hard. There is no Because last year at this time it was, hey, you guys, Malik Wright, remember Malik? You guys, Eli Apple, he's going to play. He was
Mhm.
telling us at this time last year. And there's
Sure.
nobody like that this year, not just Malik, but like in general, where it's like, yeah, there's ties going back. You can see, last year there's also Ricardo Allen, who you could have made an argument for this time last year because of his ties with Lou Anarumo. And this year, you're right. It's hard to find that sneaky guy out of all their acquisitions, unless it's an undrafted free agent.
Yeah, which, Ben Brown could certainly be someone, but something has to go wrong if that happens, right? Or
Kwame Lassiter.
yeah, maybe, but like, in as far as the ones they've signed this offseason, Stanley Morgan Jr., they re-signed him, but he
Yeah.
could certainly be in the mix there too.
Yep.
Next question comes from Joe Kane at Joe Cool 8420. What player on the Bengals roster is the most approved this year?
Is it wrong that I keep going to Jackson Carman for this? Because that's where my mind goes right away. I think. I'm, I mean, maybe there's an Eli Apple argument if he wants to get another contract in the NFL that pays him, a little bit more substantial money, pays him for more than 1 year. If he can hold off Cam Taylor-Britt and play well this year again, maybe a team takes that chance on him next year. He's going to be just 27 this year. So he still has potential tread on the tires, but I keep coming back to Jackson Carman. Second round pick, has an opportunity to start this year. And if he doesn't do it this year, does he ever do it? Does
Yeah.
does it ever click with him? I know he's still young, but you see time and time again, these guys run out of chances at some point, and often
Mhm.
it's early. And so I keep coming back to Jackson Carman for this. I think you can make an argument. Certainly for Eli Apple, you could say Jermaine Pratt playing for an extension, playing for a contract could be one as well. You could say a number of other defensive players probably.
Yeah.
Anybody else that
Uh,
like really jump out? Maybe even? Hurst playing for a contract?
Man, stop giving out names and give it to me, damn
All
it.
right,
All right,
sorry.
there we go. It is Hayden Hurst because he was drafted ahead of Lamar Jackson. And you could argue that he's been just as big of a bust or borderline as Billy Price, right? And was for the Ravens. And they were lucky to trade him and they get him to Atlanta. And he plays okay in Atlanta his first year. Second year, they replace him with Kyle Pitts, and he's just not in the rotation much, not playing much. So he's playing to me for his football future. He's going to be 29 this summer. If he's ever going to get like life-changing money, and of course millions are millions and it's changing relatively speaking, but NFL life-changing money, he's got to prove it this year. And not just for the Bengals, I'm not talking about like importance there, but like for him and his career. The other one, so I'll do one offense, one defense. You mentioned Jermaine Pratt. I'm going to stick with that room. What about Akeem Davis Gaither?
Sure.
He's a guy that could certainly be in the mix there. And I think, just coming off of that injury, year 3 now, loved his athleticism coming out. He was coming from the small school, so you knew there was going to be an adjustment, and you were hoping that by this year, that he could be not just a regular contributor, but maybe a bit of a difference maker. So I think that's someone that has something to prove for sure, and he is participating in these offseason workouts, which is great to see.
And that's a big deal for him, his availability. He's been battling injuries in his NFL career. And just to highlight how much first round picks get paid, Hayden Hurst has earned $14.5 million in his NFL career. I was just curious after you said life changing money, and I agree. Like if he's ever going to get that, $30 million deal,
Yep.
this is probably last chance saloon. But he's made 14 million bucks, which is pretty good, I would say. Last question, James, from Corey Wright at Corey Wright00 on Twitter. Who will have the third, fourth, and fifth most receiving yards for the Cincinnati Bengals this season? I imagine this is presuming that Jamar and T go 1 and 2.
Yeah, I obviously think it's going to be Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, probably in that order for first and second. Third to me is still Tyler Boyd, and that's pretty easy for me. And this is where it gets sort of interesting, but not really, because I think it's going to be Hayden Hurst. I think he's going to give them something in the passing game that they haven't necessarily had. And then fifth, unless I'm missing something, unless they add someone else, it's got to be Joe Mixon. So I think that's a pretty clear cut 1 through 5. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Hayden Hurst, Joe Mixon.
And that would be exactly the same as
Yep.
last year with Hayden Hurst subbing in for CJ Uzama. And I think that that's very reasonable. The only way that I could see it changing is if somehow Chris Evans gets on the field a ton in 4 wide receiver kind of looks where he's the 4th wide receiver and they have a lot more design for him. But he did have 17 targets last year and he averaged 10 yards a catch, which for a running back is a pretty high number compared to 7.5 for Mixon and Pirine, both of them right around 7.5. So, I mean, more opportunity for Evans could lead. So if he had Joe Mixon's targets, 48 targets at 10, 10 and 10.1 yards per catch, 42 catches for Mixon, that gets him ahead of Mixon. But that means Mixon's coming off the field a whole lot, or Pirine's coming off the field a whole lot, probably more Pirine than Mixon, I would think. And so that would be the dark horse, I would say. Would be does Chris Evans sneak in there at number 5? Or, yeah, I don't know. I have a hard time seeing Jamar or T not being 1 and 2 if they're healthy.
Yeah, I agreed with that. And the only other thing, and it would be dark horse too, do they add Will Fuller, like I've talked about? Then could he be top 5? I think so. I think that changes things a bit. But
Yeah, maybe it
but
pushes a running back out of the conversation.
yeah, and so which we'll see. But outside of that, I think it's pretty cut and dry, barring injuries, which is something that we certainly are hoping doesn't happen.
Yeah, and even if Will, like the thing with the Will Fuller thing is there's only so many targets. There's still only so many targets if these guys stay healthy. So that's where, like, if they're healthy, then it's hard to even see Will Fuller necessarily getting to 400, 500 yards or whatever it would be to get into the top 5.
Yeah, I just think that he would have like 4 catch and runs
Yeah,
of like,
could be.
2 of 80 yards, just deep balls where people are focused, players are
Yeah,
focused on these other guys, these other weapons, and 2 of 60 yards. And so a lot of them come with big plays where he
yeah.
doesn't have a ton of targets, but it's like, man, he's a grand slam cleanup type hitter.
A microwave, as they call them in basketball, right? Isn't that
There you go.
yeah.
Look at you
I
bringing the microwave back.
I know stuff about sports. Microwaves. Joe Burrow, locker room, basketball. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. As I mentioned in a few other episodes this week, we are going down to 3 episodes a week for just a little bit here in June until training camp gets going later on in July. So we'll be 3 episodes a week next week, and we'll keep you apprised as our schedule changes, but we'll still have you covered with everything going on with the Bengals. They still have practices open to the media for the next couple of weeks. And there's going to be some actual competition, as I understand it, in some of these practices. So some more spice to talk about in these practices on Tuesday for the next couple of weeks. Until next time, Bengals fans, enjoy your weekend. Thanks for listening to the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.